Your Excellencies, fellow participants in this meeting, I'm very much honoured to be here today at the first coordination meeting of the Pharmaceutical Committee here. Just to explain me and my company, my name is Michael Pender-Cudlip. IMS is an international, it's a global company specialising in healthcare and pharmaceuticals in particular. IMS Consulting Group is the largest healthcare consulting firm in the world. But the most relevant issue here is that we have offices in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf, and I and many colleagues have worked in this area for a number of years. My personal background, I spent most of my pharmaceutical career in GSK, one of the companies mentioned by Mr. Daif earlier. And if there's one thing I'm clear about from that previous presentation of his, this is a fascinating and a growing market. What I want to do is to give you a perspective on this industry and in particular in this region. I will be available as my colleague Dr. Reinhardt at a later session to discuss the implications of some of the things that we're discussing this morning for you and for the industry in this part of the world. I'm going to look at a number of things, excuse starting off with definitions, but you will see a lot of statistics pushed at you today. I got a fair number in my presentation, but I don't propose to take you through all of them, but you will get a copy of this presentation and you can review those at your leisure. But I want to use those statistics. I want to use those statistics to highlight some of the major issues which I think face healthcare in this region and in GCC in particular. Now, forgive me, quite a complicated slide. But what this shows is the value chain of pharmaceuticals. You probably aren't used to seeing it in quite this way. First of all, this is a global picture. Don't concern yourself too much about the actual figures, but the percentages are important. What we have here is research and development, and this is the discovery part of research and development. This is the development part. We have manufacture, and then we have sales and marketing. Now, just some highlights there. Globally, research and development accounts for 16%. In the generics market, of which this region is a prime example, primarily a branded generics market, we're talking about a fraction of that, 8%. And bear in mind what this represents is an investment in expertise, an investment in technology, and an investment in the future. From the manufacturing side, there's a much higher proportion from in the generics area, because that's where most of the cost lies. And then in the final sales and marketing, you see comparable significant figures. Now, just to make one thing clear, the figures that you'll be seeing from me here are very much concentrating on the sales and marketing aspect, what the value of pharmaceuticals is when they come to the market. And I'm just going to explain a bit more about how we get the figures. First of all, where do IMS numbers come from and what are they measuring? What we do is we collect information from the pharmaceutical distribution chain, distributors and pharmacies. We compile that and effectively that is funded by companies who subscribe to our services, primarily pharmaceutical companies, who then get a window on the market. We collect this data from the private market, from the retail market as we call it, from pharmacies. In countries like Saudi Arabia, where there is a very significant tender market, we estimate those based on some publicly available information and our own expertise in the area. So we can get a reasonable figure of the overall pharmaceutical market. The way in which we collect the data takes out all the complications of different distribution margins and taxes. So when we present figures comparing one country with another and one drug with another, they're all essentially on a similar basis, so you can make international comparisons. And this is particularly important when we're looking at the kind of studies that we are. Secondly, you have already seen some figures collected from governments, issued by governments and other agencies, and sometimes by the companies themselves. One reason that you'll see some different figures from us compared with other people is that we measure consumption actually in the market. Now, I will address the issue of what gets imported and what gets exported in a different way. But obviously it's important if you've got to get a sense of the value in the market of the patient demand and the infrastructure that has been described by Mr. Daif. You need to know what's actually being used in the countries. And we'll be looking at that in a moment. And finally, as I've mentioned, we're not relying purely on this data to provide us with insights. I'm not so arrogant as to claim that IMS knows what is going on and no one else does. And one of the purposes of this meeting for me is to exchange views and perspectives and maybe have differences of opinion about what is going on at the moment. I certainly think and hope that we will have some good discussion about what the implications of this are, not only for the big countries and the big companies within GCC, but for the smaller states and the smaller companies too. Because if there's one thing that I know from my experience in pharmaceuticals, both large companies and small, is that large companies and large countries need the small companies and the small countries to flourish. You look at a company like GSK, it has now institutionalized the business of getting innovation in from small companies. For me, that model applies equally well to this region. You may be, as we'll see in a moment, a relatively small market compared to the global picture, but there is growth here, there is innovation here, and there is an astonishing investment in infrastructure, both in terms of public health and technology. And that's something that I think that we can really, really benefit from. Right. What we have here is the global context. Let me draw your attention first of all to the overall figure. On the left here, this box here, global market, $1.1 trillion worth. It is huge. This is pharmaceuticals of all shapes and sizes. If we take it down to the region that we commonly call Middle East, North Africa, we're talking about 18 billion, with a growth which may seem small compared with China, for example, which is a large market growing very, very fast, but it is significantly faster than what we have in North America or Europe. And that, of course, is why a number of companies, GSK is one of them, for example, and Pfizer and others, are investing heavily in this region, mainly in manufacturing terms and development terms, but also in terms of their commercial infrastructure, because this is where growth is. I'd also draw your attention to this Asian figure on the right here, 132 billion and a growth of 18%. That is almost entirely, or it is primarily driven by China. Now, I wouldn't expect you to aspire to a market where the population is so large, but it's an interesting model for a market which has learnt how to harness expertise from the multinational companies, and they are all investing in China, and they're not just investing in the commercial infrastructure, they're not just investing in manufacturing, but they're investing in a very, very significant way in discovery and development. And that clearly is something that you would seek to encourage here. Also, of course, those companies and financial institutions are investing in local companies to create local infrastructure, local expertise, and a momentum of discovery and development, which of course will stand that economy well in going forward.